Hi, welcome to another Rialto Channel podcast. I'm Francesca, and joining me all the way from New Mexico today is the writer and director of the film, Matthew McDuffie. Welcome, Matthew.
Thank you, Francesca. Thanks for having me.
Now tell me, where are you from originally?
Oh my gosh, there's a story. America.
Right.
Which sounds bizarre, but my father was a telephone pole salesman, and I'm not kidding. And so we lived all over the country. We lived in Pittsburgh and Monroe, Louisiana, and Charleston, South Carolina, and Chicago, Illinois, and actually Vancouver, British Columbia. But yeah, all over the place.
So what is it about Albuquerque that you enjoy?
It's beautiful. It's dry, and it's gorgeous, and it's the desert, and it's beautiful.
Excellent.
You know, as Peter O'Toole says in Lawrence of Arabia, says, you know, why do you enjoy the desert? He says, because it's clean.
And of course you teach there, don't you, at the University of New Mexico, is that right?
I do. I'm professor of practice of screenwriting, and I teach filmmaking there, and I've done that for, oh my gosh, almost 18 years now. But yeah, which is great. I love mixing it up with the kids, and the kids, they're in their 20s, but still.
Yeah, that's what they seem like, isn't it? But we're going to talk a little bit about teaching a little later on. But of course, I would love to talk to you about your film Burning Bodhi. And I was wondering if you could give me your brief but well-rehearsed synopsis of the film for our listeners.
It is a story about a young person's first experience with death, and not just not the third cousin twice removed kind of death, but when a friend dies of, in this case, natural causes. And it's that sort of, I want to say, Joseph Campbell journey that you go on when you get slapped in the face by mortality. So this young man is living away from home, estranged from his folks, and his best friend from high school dies, and so he comes home to sort of deal with all that, you know, all the complicated relationships that you thought you had been able to run away from, but you can't. So it's, you know, dealing with folks and old girlfriends and friends and death. So it's a comedy.
And you, but you know what? You captured that awkwardness so well. That awkwardness of returning home when you know that you've lost touch with people, and you're all kind of aware that you've lost touch. You know, there's. I thought you really captured that so well.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Yeah, I'm fascinated with that time in life, that when you're really formulating yourself, when you don't have parents to rely on, you know, it's like when you're a teenager, you can always turn to them even if you hate their guts. But you know, everyone is kind of an orphan when they're in their 20s and just discovering that. And I think that's a really sort of a tender time to portray. You know, because it's just you're really on your own, and you have to start either creating a reality or trusting a reality, or, you know, just figure out what road you want to walk down. And I think that's just such ripe material.
And as one of the characters in the film says, it's almost a rite of passage. This is their first dead friend.
Yeah.
They are young adults.
That's really what
it is.
Yeah.
They're young adults. They do have to attempt to deal with this as adults, but really it's their first experience.
Yeah.
It got me thinking, actually, a little bit about death and grieving, because it really reminded me of my first experience when a friend of mine at age 17 died in a car crash, and how, and quite frankly, how badly we grieved, how badly we all dealt with it. You know?
Well, you have no like. There's a good way to do it, but you really have no experience with it, and it really, the thing. Part of the story, and I don't mean it sort of in a clumsy way, but I mean it is that kind of it's a Buddhist journey from selfishness to selflessness. Because you know, you when you're alone and you're immortal at 24, you're not thinking about other people. You don't have time. It's not your job to think about other people. Your job is to say, like, this is me and this is who I want to be. And then when someone dies, it really does sort of shake you out of that, and you start to see that you live in a world that's populated by other people. Do you know what I mean? It's like you start. It's sadly the most effective way to learn empathy is to lose someone.
It's true.
You can't be alone, or you can't be the only one in your world when you start to realize that people around you will leave. They become, the cliche is that it becomes more precious, but it's true. You learn how to love when you lose someone.
And I think one of the reasons that I was really drawn to Cody Horn's character, Ember, is because that when we first meet all these characters, she is the one that doesn't seem to be so focused on herself. She seems to be a little bit of the glue that holds everybody else together.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah.
And I really gravitated towards her because of that.
Yeah. Well, she's she really brought this. It's amazing what she does with the character. But you're right that she is kind of. I think she sees herself as a bodhisattva. She sees herself as a gift, and offers herself. And yet, she has her own sort of longing, painful longing in the story. But I think she gets it better than anybody else. She gets the beauty of life in the midst of how terrible things are. If you can just lie in the backyard and look at a blade of grass, it's like, okay, I think I might be able to get through this.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. What I loved about her performance as well, it was very naturalistic. I almost felt like you'd given her a character. You'd given her the character, and then you'd kind of placed her in amongst all these other stories, these sort of other scripted stories, and just let her kind of be. It was just so wonderfully naturalistic.
Yeah, it was really nice. I mean, we did a lot of sort of biographical and given circumstance kind of work, and it was interesting because I sort of grew up with that kind of Stanislavskian preparation stuff, and young actors don't want to really. They don't want to do that sort of what's my motivation kind of stuff. They want to be in the moment, which is beautiful, but you have to understand who you are in that moment to sort of to bring that to life. So we did a lot of biography stuff, like who were you when you were 6 and how did you get to this place? And you're right, it was amazing just to sort of, turn the camera on and we would do like a series. We would just, let's do the scene 3 or 4 times without breaking and just like find your way organically to the top of the scene again. And it was breathtaking to watch all of them, really, just sort of like be these people. And I think the performances are really spectacular.
Because were you quite conscious of that? Because of the subject material, it could easily become a bit angsty and melodramatic, but you definitely kept it on a much more natural line. Were you sort of aware of that possibility?
Yeah. You mean in terms of it becoming like a funeral dirge? Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
I tried to. I mean, it's funny when you watch it. Like we premiered at the Austin Film Festival, and watching it with 1,000 people, they understand it's a comedy because there is that whistling past the graveyard kind of notion. There are some very funny. They say funny things. They try to cheer one another up. So it's not. It is not just a bunch of cello notes or a room full of cellos playing. It's not a symphony because it's a small film, but there are lots of other notes, other colors within the piece. And I tried always to try to find the brightness. And actually, even the cinematography, if you'll notice, is almost super saturated.
Yes.
It has almost this Technicolor Kodachrome, lush look.
I described it. I thought of it as being a sort of like almost like a surreal memory. It just felt like a really rich dream. The cinematography.
Well, it's funny because like the father has a line where he says, he's talking about death. It's the scene in the barn with the donkeys, and he says, when my sister died, I could count every leaf on every tree, and that was actually an autobiographical line because it happened when I came out of my mother's hospice when she died, and I literally stood out there. I was all alone, and there was a forest, and everything was so specific. Every lace on every tree was visible, and I think that's one of the things that that loss teaches you is to open your eyes, which seems very obvious, but it's very true. I think if you understand loss, it makes you a kinder person.
Most definitely.
You're going to get mad first, but if you understand its gift, you might be a kinder person.
And just going back to
the goal.
Most definitely. And when just going back to what you were talking about before, and we must say to the listeners that this is actually a very sort of positive, uplifting film. Like, it's filled with lots of really life-affirming moments.
Absolutely.
But going back to that lightness that also exists in the film, because that's what we do as humans, don't we? We do try and find a way sometimes to relieve the heartache or the tension. You know, we do look for that lighter moment. And I think that you balance that so nicely in the film.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah. I mean, it is sort of like when you go to a wake and everybody's laughing, everybody's drinking, and everybody's laughing. It is sort of, it should have that kind of quality. It's not as over the top and absurd and drunken as a wake might be, at least in my experience. But it should be life affirming. It is looking at the gift.
And we mentioned the performance by Cody Horn, but of course the film also stars the big band's Kaley Cuoco, who puts in a really fantastic dramatic performance.
Doesn't she? Yes, yeah. And she came off the plane and she was she jumped in. There's that sort of mad scene montage that she has where she's getting high in a trailer, and that was the first thing that she shot. And it was really interesting because when I auditioned a whole bunch of people. And they were all terrific, but she was the one that really, it was like, oh my gosh, who is she? I had no idea who she was. And the casting director turned to me, she said, don't you know who she is? And I'm like, no. Yeah, she's in Big Bang Theory. Oh, okay. She wasn't playing Penny when she came in the room.
No, not at all.
She has such a great, she's such a good soul personally, but she was so game, and she really brought, everything to that part. She was just really lovely in every sense of the word, emotionally.
Yeah, no, definitely. Matthew, you're an accomplished screenwriter. Of course, you've written you wrote the scripts for Surrender Dorothy, A Cool Dry Place, The Face of Love. So this was your debut feature. Did you enjoy, as a director, did you enjoy the experience?
Did I what? Did I enjoy it? My God, of course. Yes.
Well, you never know.
It's no, I know, but it's and every, I don't know if every screenwriter will say it, because you one of the glorious things about being a screenwriter is that when the doors closed, you're George Clooney and you're the cinematographer and you're whatever director, you're everything. And then you hand it to other people and you go, hey, that's not what I meant.
Yeah. I know.
So that was lovely. In terms of, this was the film, I wanted to make, and I just feel it's a nice thing to be able to complete something.
Yes.
And to have not just because you don't have control, because obviously you're handing it off to actors and you're talking to a DP, but it's like this is what I intended. That was a lovely feeling.
And I'm curious, because now that you have completed it, you've followed a script right through to the very end. Has that kind of changed or informed your screenwriting in any way?
I don't know that it has. Because it's sort of, you try to find your voice. It's like, I'm not the kind of screenwriter that blows stuff up I can, but there are other people that blow stuff up better than I do.
Yep.
So it certainly helped me know my voice, what I'm, what kind of human stories I want to tell. And I'm always just told stories about how people screw up, and how you sort of embrace them anyway. But I think it didn't change me that way. It certainly taught me a lot in terms of, what it takes to make something, because, we shot this for about $12.75 American. That's hyperbole, but one of the tricks was that I shot it all on one block.
Wow, right.
Well, we were off campus, as it were. We were off location for, I think, maybe 2 days out of 18, maybe 3, and the rest of it was literally on one block. It wasn't 100 yards or meters between one location and the next. We would just walk down the street and go into this house, and walk down the street and go into this field, and go down on this, street. It was,
that's how you shoot it. That's how you shoot a film on a budget, isn't it?
Oh my God, yeah, because it was like the few days that we were having to move, it was like, we could be shooting now. It's taking us a half hour to get here.
We have to move half a block. This is outrageous.
I know. Oh, my God. How long is that taking? Anyway, so that was an education.
Was it easy to go from screenwriter to director? Was it easy for you to get this film up and running?
Do you mean in terms of like once we were greenlit and ready to go?
Yeah. Was for the first time for you to go, right, I want to direct this and actually make this happen?
No, I mean, obviously, you can't tell anybody, and I'm telling you now, so nobody else is in the room. You're scared to death because you're just not sure you're going to be able to convey your desires, which is, I mean, a director doesn't have to know everything, but they certainly have to know how to talk to everybody and how to sort of convey their vision to, the people who are hanging the lights and the people that are doing the costumes. And I discovered that I was pretty good at that. I can speak pretty well.
So was there a moment? Was there a moment when you were in this and you went, you know what, it's going to be okay. We've got this. I don't know. You know what? It was such a lovely company. It was a bunch of people that just got together that wanted to be there. The actors it's not like we had to fight because, we were paying these people scale. It wasn't like they were like, oh, please, where's my trailer? Everybody wanted to be there. So we were a nice little group, and we got along beautifully. And even just on the first day of some of the stuff that we were getting with Cody Horn, it was like, ooh, this is really pretty. This is really nice. So we fell into it pretty quickly. There were certainly days, like the most expensive day, of course, with the crane shot and all this, and we're setting it up, and there's a huge crew behind me, and the actors are like, we can't say these lines. Can we change this? That was the one sort of like, oh, okay. We're going to have this discussion
rewrite
now.
The script while the whole crew is waiting. So that was but that was kind of an adrenaline rush, and it was like, oh, can you say this? How have you said this? Have you got there at the end? So that was kind of fun.
Getting back to teaching, because this is obviously you teach, as you say, kids, and this is a film about young adults. Do the people that you're around on a day-to-day basis, did they kind of inspire or inform any of these characters with this story? Oh, well, I mean, maybe not specifically, but they certainly do inspire me just in terms of, it's getting back to that, it's one of my favorite ages in terms of how curious and strong and smart young people are. I have absolute faith in the universe just, by dealing with the 20-somethings that I deal with. I think they're a great group, the ones I know. They get a bit of a hard time sometimes, don't they? Yeah, they do, and I think that it's baloney because they're not lazy. They want things. And I don't mean that in, avarice, whatever I'm trying to say. They're not in a greedy way, but they're not waiting for their soccer trophies as a lot of people claim they are. Yeah. Hey, look, one thing I did notice that you teach, and I'm not sure if you still do, but I read it on the website, was that you teach a program about graphic novel to screenplay. Is that right? No. No, I don't. You need to update that university like website. Catalog. Which is interesting, but because my son does graphic novels, but that was like a previous class. So but it's interesting, if somebody wants to adapt something that's not, that if it's from a graphic novel or that it's from a novel, that certainly comes up in my classes if people want to adapt something, which is the interesting thing in terms of understanding. And it's difficult especially for people that write novels, is that it is a completely different beast. Yes. That it's not, what works in a novel, and it might be your favorite part of the novel, it doesn't necessarily translate to something filmic. No. You can't walk inside someone's head and see what they're thinking, which novels do so well, the interior monologue. I'm just trying to think off the top of my head, Matthew. Are any of your screenplays adaptations? No, they're all... No, The Surrender Dorothy was an adaptation. Cool Dry Place was an adaptation. That's right. Yeah. Okay. And what do you prefer? I don't think I have a preference. I love making stuff up.
So, if it's inspired by someone else's work, it's, again, closing that door, I get to do everything. So there's that sort of omniscient feeling of being able to create an entire world. I love them both, but they're both agonizing.
Yeah, exactly. So now that the wonderful rush is over of directing your debut feature film, have you got another one lined up?
My producer, Marshall Bear, and I are working on a new one that's sort of like a coming-of-age story for boomers, and we're at that stage trying to find the dough and trying to knock on doors and get people. And it's one of my favorite / least favorite stories is Matthew McConaughey, who apparently was coming out of a trailer on the first day of shooting of Dallas Buyers Club, and he says, here's to 10 years of development, and the writer happened to be there, and he said, well, what about the 10 years before that?
Exactly.
It's like you always have to have a lot of irons in the fire. You're always making. It's like one of my pet peeves is like somebody will come up to me and say, I've written a screenplay, and my little thought balloon is always, that's great, go write another.
And that is why I did ask you whether you enjoyed the process, because there are some directors who I know the writing and the making and the doing of their first film has almost killed them, and they just look at you and go, yeah, it's fun now, it's over. You never quite know.
Yeah, no, this was delightful. This was, and it was also it was not a grueling shoot because we did it in 18 days. No, this was a delight from beginning to end.
Oh, well, it's been
the editing process was terrific. My editor, Ben Callahan, and I got along great. And it was lovely. Yeah, well, David Myrick, my DP, just terrific.
Well, it's been an absolute delight to talk to you today. Thank you so much. Rialto
Francesca.
Channel is thrilled to be playing Burning Bodhi, and we can't wait to see what you come up with next.
Oh, thank you so much.